Welcome to the Grueling Truths NFL Legends Show, brought to you by Gridiron Mo. Gridiron Mo is a new interactive football app where you get to call what you think the offense or defense should do during a live NFL game and see what all other fans have called also. So check out Gridiron Mo at www.gridironmo.com. I'm your host for the Legends Show, Mike Goodpaster, and very excited today to welcome to the show former Houston Oilers linebacker Greg Bingham. How you doing, Greg?
Good. How's it going, big man?
All right. So tell us a little bit about your high school career and any early influences you might have had.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think there's a player that has not been influenced by numerous coaches that they've had over the years. Obviously, that depends on how far you go with the sport. I mean, starting with Pop Warner and then going to high school and then going to college and then going to pros. So I've had numerous coaches who have helped guide me and build me into what I am today. And I use all those tidbits when I built my company along the years.
Now, what made you decide to continue your college career, go to college at the University of Purdue?
Well, the reason I went to Purdue, to be quite frank with you, I went to a MAP school, which was Military Appointment and Preparation School. You know, they don't spend money on at West Point or the Citadel or anywhere like that where they don't have a 100% understanding that you're going to be able to make it. And so I went to a MAP school, had brilliant teachers there, and since my grades were so good, you know, I got recruited by Harvard, and Yale, and Dartmouth, and Princeton, and all the Ivy League schools too. So, you know, the coaches that I ran into were just tremendous people. But I went to Purdue because one little thing that happened, I asked a person working at a counter in one of the dorms there we were visiting where the Coke machine was. And she said, well, you go down this hall, take a right, go down the stairs, take a left, then go down the next set of stairs, take a right. Never mind, I'll show you where it's at. And she walked me all the way to the Coke machine. She didn't know I was being recruited. She just got off her chair and showed me where the Coke machine was. I said, that's impressive.
Yeah, because usually they're going out of their way just for the football players. So to have somebody do that for somebody that they don't know is a football player,
exactly.
Especially this day and age, it would be huge, but it was even big back then. You had great – go ahead.
Well, what I was saying is that was the attitude at Purdue. Purdue has a tremendous attitude, and I was impressed by that. So that's where I went, and I never looked back. And I got to tell you, you know, I'm sort of proud of it. You know, great engineering school. The first man on the moon was a Purdue engineer, good friend of mine, by the way. Last man on the moon, Gene Cernan, another good friend of mine, last man on the moon. So we're sort of proud of that fact. And when I got there in '69, the band was, you know, just playing that moonwalk thing, you know, and it was dun 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 dun, that type of stuff. It was pretty cool. It was a great campus.
All right, so you had a great sophomore and junior seasons at Purdue. You want to tell us about any memories you had there?
Well, when I got to Purdue, to be quite frank with you, they were number one in the country when I got there. So they had a lot of great recruits. They had a real good recruiting class my freshman year. And the day I got there, it seemed like I was in Disneyland. Everybody was just the best that there was in the country, if you ask me. And it seemed like they were giving out 40 scholarships, and they came to me and they said, hey, we've done a lot of hard work here, and we're pretty tired. Here, you want this last scholarship, kid? It's sort of like Joe Green taking off that jersey and so that Coke commercial. So the bottom line is, you know, that's what they seemed like, and I was way down on the depth chart. I was a tight end in high school, tight end linebacker in high school, and they want those quick guys with quick feet, and they turned me into an offensive guard. And I wasn't really guard material, but I guess because I could run. So the bottom line is the defensive line coach sort of was spotting me a little bit when I was doing demonstration, and I looked on the depth chart and knew the varsity team, and the middle guard there, Chuck Kyle, was an All-American, and all the other linebackers were all sophomores or juniors, so there's no place there, Jimmy Teal and Vino Paraskovich and guys like that. So I said, well, give me a couple cans of film and a projector, and I'll go figure out how to play this middle guard position. And I had a great coach named Tony Mason, and out of all those freshmen that I went to school with, I was the very first one starting on varsity. Went from last to first.
Yeah, and I know you had great sophomore and junior seasons, but Purdue had a big upset over Stanford. I believe it was in 1972.
Yeah, 1970, matter of fact.
And I know you had a season-ending injury early on in your senior season. How did that affect you, missing the majority of the rest of your senior season?
Well, you obviously have done your homework, and to be quite frank with you, my first game I started against All-American Center from TCU, and I just had a very good game. And my next game we played Notre Dame, and I had a very good game. And then my third game we played Stanford and Jim Plunkett, and they were number 3 in the country, and we were supposed to get slaughtered, and we beat them. And that's when I snapped my ankle. So if you remember that Joe Theismann thing, my toes were touching my shin.
Yeah.
And we were out in Stanford, so we had planned on staying there overnight. And everybody else was out having a good time in the town after we just beat Stanford. And I was sitting there with the doc in the room, and they had my leg in a cast from my toes all the way up to my hip. And our doctor's name was Bill Combs. And to be quite frank with you, he said, I'm going to level with you. You're pretty much done. So study hard because you're going to need it. And, I mean, he's a great guy and everything. And I just laid in that bed and I said to myself, we'll see about that. And I left the fraternity then and moved into a private house with another guy, and what I did was train more than any time I did in my career to show them I could come back, and I did. So the rest, all I can say, is history. Well, my junior year, the first game, they won't, just hand you back your job. You have to earn that back. So I earned it back, and we opened up the season with Sonny Sixkiller and the Washington Huskies out there in Washington. And to be quite frank with you, I'll never forget it. There was a little street problem going on with this guy beating up this girl. And I sat there, it seemed like for an hour, but it was actually about 4 seconds. And he was beating her up pretty bad. And I get involved, and all of a sudden I'm going to get arrested. This was the night before the game. Then I lose my job. I said, well, hell with it. So I just went in there and held him down and told her to run, and the rest of that is history. So I didn't get thrown in jail or anything. I just had to make a decision, But I saw my whole career go down the drain right there, or risked it, if you will, and it didn't happen. So here I am.
Yeah, that was the 71 season. I know you guys, the record wasn't very good, but you had a good team. Cause I think you lost to Washington by like 3, and you almost upset Notre Dame, who was ranked number 2 the next week.
Yeah, we had a lot of great players. I mean, we really did. As I told you, we had a great recruiting class. Arguably the best college class that ever showed up in the National Football League. I mean, we had a couple hundred years of pro football on that team. Dave Butts was there, and Otis Armstrong was there. We were all freshmen together. Gary Danielson, Darryl Stingley. I mean, myself, Steve Baumgartner, Gary Rivnak. I mean, I can go on and on. There was a lot of great players on that team. Yeah,
and then come your senior year, I think you guys went like 6-5, had a good season, had a few tough losses again that made your team not look quite as good as you were. You were drafted by the Houston Oilers in 1973. What was your first opinion of being drafted number 1 and going to Houston number 2?
Well, to be quite frank with you, you're thrilled to get drafted. That's number 1. But here again, remember I was playing middle guard. It was the only place to play on that team. And I picked that position. And to be quite frank with you, I was a little out of position. When we played in the All-Star game, Duffy Doherty was the coach, Michigan State head coach, and Duffy came to me and says, well, I'm going to let you play linebacker because you're not going to play defensive line in the pros. And I had a really good All-Star game, and then the guy, scout down here named Bruce Kebrick, he was sharp enough to see me and told Sid that this kid can play now, I'm telling you. And Sid says, how big is he? Well, he's only about 6'2". And, well, that's not very big. How much does he weigh? Well, he weighs about 235, Coach. Well, I was actually about 218. And, but so he fibbed a little bit, but I got in there the very first, I started the very first preseason game against no other than Joe Namath. That was, I got to call my own signals the very first game, and that's the way we did it. And it was Joe Namath was the quarterback with the Jets. So that went on for another 12 more years.
Well, and I know 1973, the Oilers had a little bit of a rough start. They went 1-13 your first season. But I do know Sid Gilman, Hall of Fame coach, replaced, I think it was Peterson the coach there then?
Right, Bill Peterson.
Yeah, he replaced Bill Peterson. And, you want to talk a little bit about Sid Gilman?
Sid Gilman is one of the architects of modern-day football. Sid Gilman was a brilliant guy, an OBS type of guy, but he was always ahead of everybody else, and you could tell that. He was sort of like my grandfather, to be quite frank with you, because he was up there in the years. He never sat around and BS with you. He just talked about football, and he's arguably, one of the main architects of throwing the football, and I like to say that he probably was, and then everybody else had to follow what he was doing, and then you have Eric Coryell and Bill Walsh and all the rest of that who follow. So,
yeah, and all that came from Sid Gilman, or at least the basics of it.
Right. Sid was way ahead of his time, great person, and I got to tell you something. I have had great coaches all along the way, great people, and great mentors. Even in high school, my head coach was Tom Winnecki. Great person he was. And, I knew all these things about these people, and they've just been responsible for raising so many citizens. I call us citizens once you leave football and get into the real world. They've really been instrumental in doing tremendous job of character building.
Yeah, and Sid Gilman led to a turnaround. Go ahead.
Excuse me?
Go ahead. I think I interrupted you there.
No problem.
All right, so 1974, Sid Gilman gets you guys back to 7-7. 1975, the Oilers' fortunes changed with the arrival of Bum Phillips, who I think is one of the most underrated coaches in NFL history, especially defensively and the things he did with the 3-4. Can you tell us how Bum changed the culture of that Oilers team?
Well, first of all, let me tell you something about Bum. This is Bum Phillips. Bum Phillips was a pretty crafty guy. And when I mean a pretty crafty guy, I mean, he was smart. He knew how to build a winner. He knew how to get the most out of people. And what Bum would do is he hired great assistants. You see, I have a theory on how to build a championship team. And I know I'm 100% right, not 99, not 96. I'm 100% right. And that is with 12, this is in the pros I'm talking about, it takes 12 people to build a dynasty. And here is the formula. 9 guys in coaching shorts, 2 guys with suits and ties, and a quarterback. I just said one player. I told our owner down here, Bob McNair, I said, Bob, let me tell you something. Wade Phillips just got fired up in Dallas. You ought to go up and get him up there. Bring him down here to be the defense coordinator. He'll turn this defense around because your defense is really bad. And the reason the defense was bad because the coaches were not good enough.
Yeah.
So he went up to Dallas, got Wade down here, and they went from, 29th in the league to 2nd in a year. So remember, I told you it takes 12 people to build a dynasty. That's 9 guys in coaching shorts. 2 guys with suits and ties. The 2 guys with suits and ties are a general manager and a director of pro personnel. And the 12th guy is a quarterback. Yes, you need a quarterback. I told him, I said, if you can get your choice of coaches throughout the National Football League, and you give me a general manager and a director of pro personnel, I'll take the Texas penal system for the rest of my players as long as I can go to Martin Luther King Boulevard and get 4 kids off the basketball courts who can cover. And I'll be in the playoffs in 2 years. And that's how you do it, because the coaches are the ones that take the talent and train them to do what they need to do to work in unison together.
Yeah, and I think that football coaches play a bigger part, especially in the NFL, really any level. They have more impact on a game than a baseball or a basketball coach.
Absolutely. No doubt about it, because they make it's sort of like a hand. Instead of having 4 fingers and a thumb, or 5 fingers, however you want to look at it, you have to have 11 guys all working in unison. Coaches are so important at the professional level. Now, in college and in high school, if my players are 6'6" and your players are 6'3", I'm going to beat you. And if your players run 4.6s and my players run 4.9s, you're going to beat me. So in high school and college level, no doubt about it, talent is what wins. But at the pro level, everybody has talent. And if you don't think so, I will take the last place team in the National Football League. I'll take all their players. You can take the world champion Broncos. We're going to Hawaii, and we're going to do decathlon events. About 10 events of running and jumping, and the score is going to be 6'4", 5'5", or 4'6". It's just everybody's got the talent out there at the professional level. It's what you do with that talent, how you train. I mean, I'm not being derisive or anything, but it's how you train the circus animals to do what you need them to do and how fast you can get that done efficiently.
Yeah, how much you can get people to buy into what you're selling also as a coach.
Absolutely, and that's another thing Bum was great at. He hired great coaches. I mean, we had great coaches. We really did.
The thing about Bum is we've had Dan Pastorini, Robert Brazil, guys like that played for him. And I think the thing that really made Bum a great coach was the fact that all of his players, the way they talk about him, those players knew that Bum really cared about them as people.
Absolutely. Bum was, Bum was smart where he hired great assistants. We had a great assistants. And if you don't think so, take a look at the coaching tree there. Several of those assistants became head coaches. So,
and his son's one of the best defensive coordinators in football.
Well, I mean, no doubt about that. But, I mean, what I'm really trying to tell you is that he hired the guys who would run the stagecoach. And they'd sit up there and they'd tell those horses where to go, and he would just direct them. I mean, he hired great coaches. Joe Bugle was the offensive line coach, was a head coach. Wade was my linebacker coach. I was the first guy he ever coached in the pro level. And Eddie Biles, like I said, was the head coach. And Wade was the head coach, and wasn't Joe Bugle was the head coach. There's a lot of head coaches on that staff.
Yeah, and you talk about the players you played with on the defense. I mean, you want to talk a little bit about Robert Brazil. I think he's the most underrated linebacker that's played in NFL history, really.
Well, let me tell you about Robert Brazil. Robert Brazil when they went down to school, Jackson State, to look at this kid named Walter Payton, and the scouts lined the two of them up and ran a 40-yard dash. Well, Robert beat Walter in the 40-yard dash. That being said, what happened is, to be quite frank with you, we got a kid named Vernon Perry from Chicago Bears. Now, he was a big kid, and he was playing corner. And Jackson was playing corner in Chicago, and Chicago waived him. Well, Eddie said, hey, I'm going to move you to strong safety. And he took out the opposing tight end one-on-one in man-to-man coverage. What that allowed me to do was take Brazil and put him on the remaining running back, and that would allow the weak safety to double with the strong corner, and I, from the other inside position, would double with the weak corner, and there's no place to throw. That's pretty much doubling, because you've got two guys taking out man-to-man, and you got the two most important receivers doubled. You can't beat that, and that was devised by Eddie Biles. And I got to tell you something. We shut down all the teams with our defense. And even like when Vernon Perry against the San Diego Chargers, he had 3 interceptions in the playoff game. Tremendous athlete. Was on the corner in Chicago, but we put him at strong safety, and Eddie Biles did that. Bum hired great assistants. Bum was smart. He hired great assistants.
Yeah, and you talked about Vernon Perry with the 3 interceptions. I mean, to me, that was still, I think, the most impressive win I've ever seen in a divisional playoff game. You guys go in with your starting quarterback, Dan Pastorini, out. You go with Earl Campbell out. I know Rob Carpenter filled in for him on a bad ankle. You were missing Kenny Burroughs, your number 1 receiver, and you go in and beat the San Diego Chargers, who were averaging probably 30 points a game that year. You want to talk a little bit about that game and the circumstances?
Well, it was – you want to know a little inside, Poopy?
What's that?
Well, Eddie Biles noticed in the tight end zone film that the right guard would, when he was pass protecting, his name was Ed White, when he'd pull back his left foot, he would step on Fouts' foot. So he comes to me and Mike Reinfeldt and says, listen, I got a little inside deal here. And every time he's passing the ball, his feet are parallel, and every time, he's running the ball, his feet are parallel, and every time he's passing the ball, he drops his right foot 6 inches. Look at this in this film, and it was 100% accurate. So we called audibles line of scrimmage, all 68 plays. And I was right 67 out of 68 plays. And that meant that the defensive line could tee off and didn't have to read. You have to read a millisecond there to see whether they're running the ball or throwing the ball.
Yeah.
And here's the audible. It's really complicated. Air Force for throwing and Army for running. So we knew what they were doing every single play. We didn't know where, but we knew what they were doing. That meant that the defensive line could widen and go into their pass rush right away. And that hurried Fouts, and that gave Vernon the opportunity to get those 3 interceptions.
Yeah, it tells your linebackers whether they have to drop into coverage right away or not also.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we talk that Houston Oilers team, like I said, I was a Bengals fan actually, but I loved watching the Oilers 78, 79 because let's face it, my team wasn't getting to the playoffs. But, I mean, the thing that really stood out to me, late 70s, I think the 78, 79 AFC Championship game, the regular season games you guys played with the Steelers. You want to talk a little bit about your rivalry with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, the Steelers were another example of a team running an offense that was designed for them. And, I've seen coaches make mistakes before, and they shouldn't even do some of the things they've done. For instance, Franco Harris, I can't tell you how dangerous he was And the reason I say that is because he was a patient back. He would let the offensive linemen go to where they're supposed to go, and then he would read what the defensive line was doing. So if you're slanting one way and they ran a 35 bluff trap, if you slant the wrong way, he'd run it back to the 33 bluff trap. And if you slant the other way, he'd just keep running 35 bluff traps. So he actually read. That's why he was a patient guy, had tremendous quick feet. So he would just stutter a little bit, if you understand, and read the hole.
Yeah.
And you could not, we did make a little mistake there trying to, let's try this Pittsburgh Steeler trap on our offense. Earl Campbell is not a reading back. He just hits the hole. And if it's not there, he'll make one. But Franco actually read the holes. And he read the holes on what the defensive scheme was. So he was very patient. And Franco Harris was a hell of a back, I'll tell you. Is he in the Hall of Fame, by the way?
I believe he is.
Is he? Well, he should be.
You never know anymore. They leave out so many guys that deserve to be in. I mean, off that Oilers team, the guys that really stand out to me are Curly Culp and Robert.
Yeah. Well, Robert should be in it, and Curly is in it. And Elvin, now I'll tell you something else.
Oh, Curly did get in? Okay.
Oh, yeah, Curly's in. Yeah, Curly's in and Elvin's in.
Yeah, because to me, Robert Brazil was Lawrence Taylor before Lawrence Taylor was.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you something else, too. That's very important, and coaches will understand. I don't know if people will understand, but Robert Brazil, not only was he quick, and not only was he fast, and not only was he tough, and not only was he flexible, and not only was he durable, but he was also a great human being,
Yeah.
And I played the Steelers, Robert and I played the Steelers something like 26 times. So the other team gets to know you pretty good. So we had signals, and they were picking them up. We just played them too many times, so they knew our signals. And our signal, like, for instance, when I would take Robert's spot and he'd take my spot, we just change holes just to make it difficult on the offensive line blocking scheme. We'd have little signals called Indian and Cowboy. Well, yeah. What we did on the sidelines, they were picking us up, and Eddie Biles comes to us and says, "We got to do something here." I said, "Okay, Robert, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Every time I say a cowboy name, then it's a cowboy, and every time I say an Indian name, it's an Indian." It was really difficult, huh? So, anyways, instead of saying Indian and Cowboy, I go, John Wayne, go Chiefs, Red Cloud. And then Steelers completely lost us then. They didn't know what we were doing. But that was an on-field adjustment.
Yeah. But, yeah, I agree. Robert's a great guy. I've talked to him on numerous occasions since he's been on the show, and he's one of the favorite guys that I've interviewed on here over the last year. 1980, y'all made a little trade. You got rid of Pastorini, brought in Stabler. You guys ended up losing in the wild card to the eventual world champions, the Raiders, and then immediately after that, Bud Adams fires Bum Phillips. What was the effect of Bum leaving?
Well, it took sort of like deflating a balloon. That's really what happens, But the real problem was, if you really want to know the minutia of what happened there, Bud Adams got in his brain, and let me tell you something about Bud Adams. He takes a lot of heat down here. But in Houston I'm talking about. But Bud Adams has done more for Houston, Texas than anybody else you can name. And I'll give you a month to research it, and you'll never find anybody who's done more for Houston, Texas. He put his money down here. He built his business down here. And there's a lot of successful people down here that are here because of Bud Adams, so he should get kudos. They used to beat him up pretty hard here in the media, but the media was wrong. That being said, when you're talking about great coaches, Bum didn't want to name an offensive coordinator. And Bud got it in his brain that, listen, an offensive coordinator has to be the director of a movie. And we had the script writer there, we had the executive producer there, and we had, the director there. So we had three guys trying to run the offense, and he just didn't think it was efficient enough. Do you follow what I'm saying? He wanted one guy to be responsible rather than a triumvirate like the offensive line coach and the passing coach and the running back coach. You see what I'm saying? We had three guys, and he just didn't want to do that. So that's where they got crossways, if you really want to know. Bud wanted to name an offensive coordinator, and Bum didn't want to do it.
Well, is there anything you would change about your career if you had the opportunity?
No, I really, it's your philosophy in life. You gotta live your life the way it comes, and there's really nothing I'd change. If you're talking about football-wise, investing-wise, well, and trying to help humanity-wise. Now, if you've got a good BS meter, and I'll tell you what it is, it's a game changer. And to make a long story short, here it is. Feeding people globally, 7 billion people. Feeding people is easy. You just truck it in, you fly it in, you ship it in, however you get it in. But getting people to be able to get a good 8-hour sleep and get up the next day, that's very difficult to do. Because in a lot of these third world countries, you're fighting the elements of spiders and cockroaches and rats and bugs and lions and tigers. And on a global basis, if you want to get productivity out of this earth, you need to have people sleeping 8 hours a day so they can put in 10 hours the next day. And a buddy of mine in Houston, Texas, name's Wayne Coleman, and I came up with a way to build a house that'll last 100 years out of solid concrete and pass out a set of keys every 60 minutes, 365 days a year. That is moving. And it seems impossible, but we've done it. We've built tens of thousands of houses in Mexico. And my biggest regret is that the globe does not recognize what we've been able to do. That's my biggest regret.
People are too busy worrying about what's going on in their own lives, and they really don't care about the people around them anymore.
You're exactly right. And the older you get, you look back at the titans who built this country, whether you're talking about Claudius Vanderbilt or Rockefeller, guys like that, or J.P. Morgan, they've all left their mark on society as being innovators. And of all the things I've done in my life, that's my biggest regret, that I haven't been able to get that accomplished yet. Although we've built 50,000 houses. You got a good start,
though. Yeah, it sounds like you got a good start.
We do, but you need a lot of political capital. And there's not a lot of political capital out there in the world today. There really isn't. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And, I mean, that brings us also to this big corporation called the NFL. What's your opinion on the way they handle their older players, especially the injured players?
Well, you know about the concussions, and you know about the injuries that people have had. The hard part, if you really want to know, this gets tried in the court of public opinion. And then I have another theory, and that is very simply, you never fight a man who buys his ink by the gallon. So the National Football League does buy their ink by the gallon, so it's very difficult to fight them. However, there is these media sources that are popping up, these blogs, et cetera, to where the story is getting out. So when you're talking about those concussion things, the concussion issue is very simply a matter of getting the story out and exactly who pays. You see, from my seat, if you have an injured player and that injured player has to be able to go to get benefits, and I mean put him back to where he was. I'm not saying enhance him. I'm saying just get him back to or something reasonable. You have what's called Medicare or Medicaid. Medicare is, most people don't know what Medicare and Medicaid is. But Medicare is an insurance, health insurance situation to where you go get your health insurance from the government after you've paid in X amount over the years. Medicaid is, I'm broke, take care of me. So when these players come to Medicaid, then what's really happening, the responsibility of those players is being shifted from the management or owners of the NFL and being shifted to the taxpayers of the country. And that's what people don't understand, the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. So they should be taking care of their players, but they're not. And they're going out the back door with the cash and leaving the bills for the taxpayers to pay. Can't be any simpler than that.
Yeah, and I mean the NFL always leaves the taxpayers holding to. I mean, look at all the NFL stadiums that are financed mainly. I mean, I'm a Bengals fan. The Bengals stadium was a complete rip-off for the city. I mean, I think the Brown family paid like $5 million out of $100 million for the stadium.
Well, you're right. Now, let me tell you one of the dark things that people have to understand, though. The government, and I don't care if it's local or federal or whatever it is, the government will twist it in you. The government can, and so it's very difficult to do what Kraft did. Kraft went up there in New England and built his own complex. Jerry Jones did the same thing in Texas, built his own complex. But you see, if you build your own complex, sometimes the government come in here and change the rules on you, and all of a sudden they got you. You got $1 billion out there, and they'll twist it in you, if you know what I'm saying.
Well,
so from my seat, they can, and they do. No doubt about it. So you have to protect yourself, and most of the owners don't want to get involved in that. They just take, we'll guarantee that we'll lease it from you for 20, which is not many. I mean, 10 games a season. That's not a whole bunch of leasing, if you know what I mean. I like the multi-purpose buildings to where you can have concerts in there, you can have basketball games in there, you can have the demolition derbies in there, you can play baseball in there. I mean, if I had an asset, I'd want to use the asset 24/7, 365. That's maximization.
Yeah.
So, it depends on how productive your area is. And that's why, for instance, out in California, they keep on going Al Davis et al., and all the teams keep switching and moving and switching and moving. And it does get old after a while staying up. Well, let's see now, what year was that or what decade was that?
Yeah, because where I'm at, I still call the Cardinals the St. Louis Cardinals, and I was calling the Rams the L.A. Rams, as recently as a pick'em show I do with Leon Searcy like 2 months ago. So I guess they switched it back, so I'll be good now.
Yeah, it's very difficult staying up with them. And then, remember, you don't fight a man and buy zinc by the gallon. So they lobby, and then they get these things accomplished because here's the deal to having a successful city. As a mayor, you have to have professional baseball, professional football, and basketball. And the reason is very simply this. It is what employers need for their employees. So if you want to get a big company to come into your city and operate out of your city, then you need to have those three franchises there because they want their employees to enjoy where they're working, and that's very important. So if you want to build a city as a mayor, you have to get in the fight to get some of these franchises to come to your city. And that's how it's done. They can bring their big time clients when they come into town, sit them in a box at a New York Jets game or something. Absolutely, exactly. So we talked a little bit about how the NFL handles players. I know I read something about you had a football-related stroke in 2009. You want to explain to us what happened there and how the NFL handled that? Well, it was, first of all, you're talking about my life. And, I have no choice other than continue to live. And I had what is called an AVM. Now, AVM stands for arterial venous malformation.
Actually, my mom had that in her spine. It ended up basically ending her life.
Yeah. Yeah, I was extremely lucky. I had a guy by the name of Dong Kim. Dr. Kim saved my life. He cut off the top of my head. He put it in the refrigerator and operated on my brain, then went back to the refrigerator and got the top of my head back out, stapled it on, and then came out to my family and said, I did great work. We'll just have to see whether he wakes up or not. But you can't do it any better than I did it. And 5 weeks later, I woke up out of that coma. Now, I got to tell you, when I say I woke up out of that coma, there was absolutely no recording in my brain going on for 5 weeks. I was awake, but I have no recollection of being awake. So finally, I woke up one morning after 5 weeks, and I went out to see this nurse. It was a male nurse at night, and I said, what in the world am I doing here? What's going on? And he handed me a booklet, and he said, well, here's your history for the last 5 weeks. Go back in your room and read about it. And that's where I started putting the pieces of the puzzle back together. So it scared the daylights out of my family, I will tell you that. It didn't scare me because I was not even here, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But it made a remarkable recovery, and glad that I have. And I've got a new appreciation and a new lease on life, if you will.
My question to you is this. The thing that bothers me is you've had a rash like the Junior Seau's, guys like that have killed themselves. And usually, the thing that's amazing to me is how they do it so their brains can be checked. That will tell you there's a problem right there. Now, my other question is, and I saw you raise this in an interview a few years ago, do you think steroid use has anything to do with this?
Let me tell you something. We're talking about a hot topic there, and you're only the second guy that I've ever heard bring it up. But there has to be more studying done, and I know this, and what I know is I have never touched steroids, and the reason is very simply because my legs and my quickness was the best thing I had.
Yeah.
Then the next best thing I had was my brain, because I think well. Therefore, I never wanted to touch steroids. Now, I can understand some offensive linemen are 260, need to get up to 290. I can understand them doing it, but for me, it does build muscles, and I didn't want to screw around my legs because they're the best things I had.
Yeah.
So I never touched steroids. But I have to tell you, I can't help not believe that it has something to do with it. I'm going to tell you, although I never saw any of those Steeler offensive linemen do steroids, a lot of them are dead now, and they're all out there with we called, your arms are guns. They had guns the size of tanks. I mean, they were just huge guys. And Mike Webster, for instance, I'll be quite frank with you, I played against Mike Webster for 16 years. Remember, I was a nose guard, and he was at Wisconsin as a center. So I played against him college and pros. And look what happened to Mike. So there is a link there, but you see, you have to prove that in a court of law, and then you have to have a lot of science behind it. So it's going to take money to continue to study it, and it's going to take time to study it. And when I mean time, you're not going to get that answer in a day, a week, a month, or a year. It's going to take a lot of science to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, and I don't think the NFL is going to throw a bunch of money at it trying to find it.
No, they're not going to throw a nickel at it. So
no, the NFL only does something if the public gets on their ass and demands it, and then they just do something to basically pacify the people.
Exactly right. And they're selling a product, and I mean, you can't blame them. I mean, you just can't. They're making a hell of a lot of money. What you have to
Yeah,
have
but
is
the one thing I have learned is this, though. Even if you've got a big business and you make a hell of a lot of money, and I never understood this because most businesses like this is why most people are, hate their jobs. But I think that if you actually were to take care of your employees, you would make even more money.
Well, let me tell you something. It's interesting you say that because I am an employer, and I have a great company. I don't sound like a Donald Trump, but I do have a great company. And I have, seriously, I would say 50% of my people have been with me. 25% of my people have been with me 25 years. 25% have been with me 10 years. 10% of my people have been with me 2 or 3 years, and then we have the rest of the revolving door, which is just normal. So I have a lot of guys who've been with me for decades, and we do wear a lot of hats in our management here. We're their big brothers, we're their dads, we're their uncles, we're their best friends. I mean, we have to loan money to our people from time to time. It's just the way it is. You don't have to go to the bank. You just come see us if you get short or whatever, and that's the way we handle it, and that's the way you should be. Yeah. That's why we have such loyal people. I have great people, just great people. Charlie Hill has been with me since the 80s. You can't beat that.
Yeah, if everybody would treat their employees like that, everything would run a lot better. But do you have a website or anything people can find out more about your business?
Yeah, we're a little bit behind on that topic. If you really want to know, we have some ideas that we're going to start doing. We need to get those things implemented, if you will. But we just haven't done the website. We've taken the position that you want to have locations. So we've got a lot of corner locations, and look, it's the 3 most important things to have a successful business from my seat is location, location, and location. And we focused on that, and now we are dragging our feet. We need to get more into and we have some great ideas on board that we were going to innovate 15 years ago. Now the technology has come to us, so that thought and idea is just way ahead of its time, and the infrastructure is there, so we don't have to invent the wheel anymore. The wheel's already been invented. We just need to implement them. But we do have locations. That's the key. We're on the corner. We're on corners. We have a lot of corners, and what that does is that keeps you from getting covered up on a visual standpoint. So everybody who drives by, they can all be your customers.
Yeah. All right. Well, I could tell you this, Greg. This just adds you to the line of the Love You Blue Oilers that I've interviewed, and I haven't interviewed one of you guys yet that I didn't come away with more impressed with than I was before.
Well, I appreciate that, big man. I just enjoyed chatting with you, and I'll tell you something. Listening to you, you go back in the history, you're very well prepared. And I have to tell you, that's the key for all the young people trying to get somewhere. If you want to get somewhere, you have to know your history. If you know your history, you know what mistakes not to repeat. That's the biggest thing that people need to learn. Learn the history so you don't repeat the mistakes, and you can always do something innovative.
Yeah, and you have to know what came before you. I mean, the reason we do the NFL Legends Show, like I said, we've had guys like Robert Brazil, Ed White, Roger Craig, Tom Flores, all these guys on, yourself, Dan Pastorini. But my big thing here is it's a way for guys to tell their story and to tell younger people, there was something before, the 1990s or the 2000s.
Absolutely.
But once again, it was an honor having you on, Greg.
I appreciate it, big man. Good to talk to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg.
See you later.
All right. See ya. So make sure you check out the Grueling Truth Facebook page. Check us out on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher. Check out all our interviews this week. We've had on former NFL head coach Jim Hannafin, who was the head coach of the Cardinals. We had last night former Cincinnati Bengals offensive lineman Bruce Reimers. Also last night, we had former Bengals offensive line coach Jim McNally. Of course, you just listened to Greg Bingham. So make sure you check out all the Grueling Truth shows. Check out our sponsors, which would be Gridiron Mo's. Check them out at gridironmo.com. Check out steelbergboxscott.com and also realbengalsfans.com. So for Greg Bingham, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.